0 o'clock to 2 o'clock. It was a fog-soaked evening in late September 1995, the kind of night where the North Sea air clings to your skin and silence feels louder than sound. Scarborough, a quiet seaside town in North Yorkshire, was winding down after a late summer tourist rush. Locals say the cliffs seemed to breathe that night alive with something unseen. 17-year-old Elaine Dalton left her family's small flat near the Esplanade just before 7:30 p.m. She said she needed fresh air. She took nothing but her coat and her journal. By 8 p.m., she was gone. Not a scream, not a witness, just gone. The next morning, the only trace of Elaine was her footprints leading to the edge of a grassy cliff trail and stopping dead in the middle of the path. Search dogs found nothing. Divers came up empty. And then, silence. For nearly 30 years. But now, a podcast has reopened the case. Buried inside one of Elaine's old high school notebooks found tucked away in an attic by her younger brother were cryptic entries written just days before she vanished. Mentions of shadows that follow, voices on the cliffs, and a chilling phrase repeated 3 times. He said the fog hides things. Was Elaine running from someone? Or something? And how can someone disappear in a town this small without a single soul seeing a thing? This is the story of Elaine Dalton, the girl who vanished into the fog ... and may have left behind the truth written in the margins of her diary. Full story. Elaine Dalton was the kind of girl people remembered. Not because she was loud or flashy, quite the opposite. Elaine had a quiet, magnetic stillness. Her teachers at Scarborough Grammar said she was brilliant but burdened. Her classmates described her as kind, curious, and always sketching in the corners of her notebooks. But those closest to her knew there was something else, something unspoken. She had a fascination with local folklore. Her room was filled with books on British myths, sea legends, and unsolved mysteries. Her walls? Covered in maps and coastal sketches. Her favorite place to be was the East Pier at sunset, notebook in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon like she was waiting for something or someone. Her mother, Judith Dalton, said Elaine had been having vivid dreams in the months before she vanished. She'd wake up screaming some nights, clutching her journal. When asked what was wrong, Elaine would only say, "He's watching again." Elaine's journal entries grew darker, more poetic and more cryptic. She began sketching a tall man in a long coat, always near a cliff's edge, sometimes holding what looked like a lighthouse lantern. Her last entry simply read, "I finally understand what he meant. The sea doesn't just take, it remembers." To the outside world, Elaine was a gifted student with a bright future. But to those who truly paid attention, she was a girl unraveling. And now, her disappearance is pulling everyone else into the threads she left behind. Who was Elaine Dalton? A dreamer, a runaway, or the final page in a story no one saw coming? It was Saturday, September 23, 1995. The day had been warm, but by nightfall, a cold mist rolled over Scarborough's cliffs. Elaine told her mother she was stepping out for a walk before dinner. She didn't take her school bag, wallet, or any belongings. Just her oversized green coat and her journal. At 7:42 p.m., a neighbor spotted her walking toward Marine Drive, where the cliffs begin to rise against the sea. She waved. Elaine didn't wave back. That was the last time anyone saw her. When Elaine didn't return home by 9 p.m., Judith called friends. Then the police. By midnight, search parties were scouring the coastline. Dogs, divers, helicopters, nothing. But what was chilling wasn't what they found. It was what they didn't. No signs of struggle. No footprints past the gravel path. No personal items dropped. Only one clue, Elaine's journal, found on a stone bench near the edge of Holbeck Hill. It was open to a fresh page. On it was a sketch of a towering silhouette standing on the sea, shrouded in mist. And scrawled beneath it, in red ink, "He waits where the fog lives." Investigators were baffled. The tide hadn't come in yet, meaning if Elaine had fallen, the body would have likely been recoverable. But there was no trace. The cliff's edge showed no sign of a fall. And Elaine's notebook, dry as bone, despite the rising damp. Locals began to whisper. Some blamed the sea. Others murmured about old coastal legends. And if you believed the girl had seen something she shouldn't have, something tied to an unsolved death decades earlier in the same area. But officially, Elaine Dalton became another name in a growing list of the missing. Unsolved, unfinished, unbelievable. The Scarborough police launched what they called a full-scale coastal investigation. But behind the press conferences and search grids, there was confusion, real, unsettling confusion. Lead investigator DCI Malcolm Hensley called it the cleanest missing person case he'd ever seen. No physical evidence, no signs of distress, no body, Just a teenage girl who vanished without a trace except for her chilling final journal entry and that haunting sketch. Divers searched the coastline for over a week. Helicopters scanned the surrounding farmland. Tracker dogs followed her scent to the cliff bench. And then it vanished like she had simply stepped into the fog and disappeared. Neighbors were questioned. Teachers, her closest friends. Everyone said the same thing. Elaine had been withdrawn, more obsessed with folklore and legends than ever before. Her art was darker, her words more cryptic. And then there were the anonymous letters. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Judith Dalton received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a torn piece of notebook paper. On it, typed in red ink, she went looking for the watcher. He's older than the tide. Police dismissed it as a cruel prank, but Judith was convinced it was from someone who knew something, possibly someone watching. The case was quietly moved to the cold file shelves in early 1996. Elaine's name would resurface only when her school held an annual vigil. But no leads, no suspects, no forensic trail. The official word. Presumed dead by misadventure. But those who knew her weren't so sure. They believed the truth was buried somewhere beyond the cliff, past the reach of the tide, where the fog lives and where something else might, too. For the next 9 years, Elaine Dalton's name became a whisper spoken only in past tense. Her room remained untouched. Her mother, Judith, refused to move away from Scarborough, convinced her daughter might return. Every night, she left the porch light on. Every year on Elaine's birthday, she bought a new sketchbook and left it by the cliff bench. But the town had moved on. The police had moved on. The story faded into local legend, lumped in with maritime ghost tales and seaside myths. Until the second letter arrived. It was July 2004, nearly a decade after Elaine vanished. Judith opened her post to find another envelope. Again, no return address. But this time, inside wasn't a typed note. It was a Polaroid, a blurry image. A girl seated on a stone bench, wrapped in a green coat, her face obscured by fog. But the sketchbook was unmistakable. So was the handwriting scribbled in the corner. She watches the sea now. The image was sent to police. They confirmed it was taken on Holbeck Hill. But there was no timestamp, no way to verify when, and again no fingerprints. The case was reopened. For a week, no new leads emerged, no one came forward, and soon, silence returned. But for a small online community of amateur sleuths and folklore researchers, that Polaroid became fuel. Some believed it was a hoax, others, they believed Elaine had entered something ancient, something coastal, something that could bend time, or trap the lost. Then, in 2009, the first episode of a new podcast changed everything. In early 2009, a small but growing true crime podcast out of Manchester titled Vanished Coast aired an episode that reignited public interest in Elaine Dalton's case. The hosts, two former investigative journalists, focused on cold cases with folklore ties. Elaine's story was their season 2 opener. They called it The Girl Who Drew the Fog. What began as a niche episode turned into a phenomenon. Downloads skyrocketed. Reddit threads exploded. Listeners began visiting Scarborough, retracing Elaine's final walk, sitting on the cliff bench, posting theories, and more strangely sketches. Many claimed to feel watched while visiting the area, but it was episode 3 that changed everything. The podcast released a previously unreleased audio interview from 1995 with a local lighthouse keeper named Arthur Bell. In the tape, Arthur recalled seeing a girl matching Elaine's description standing at the cliff's edge the night she vanished, but not alone. She wasn't alone. There was something else, something tall, cloaked, fog thick around it, but it wasn't moving right. Not like a man. I didn't speak of it then. People would have said I'd gone mad. Listeners were divided. Some believed Arthur was protecting someone. Others thought he'd seen something supernatural. But it was the final revelation from the podcast that sent shockwaves through the case. A retired mail carrier came forward. He had never spoken publicly, but said he'd recognized the handwriting from the letters Judith had received. He believed they were typed using a rare Hermes baby typewriter. Only 3 had been registered in Scarborough in the early 90s. One belonged to Elaine Dalton. Was Elaine sending the letters herself? Was she still alive? Or had someone else gotten their hands on her typewriter? The podcast ended the season with a chilling message. Elaine may still be watching the sea. But is she watching alone? August 3, 1995. Elaine Dalton leaves her home around 6:40 p.m. to clear her head. 7:10 p.m. A local sees her sketching on Holbeck Hill. 8:12 p.m. She's spotted again, this time standing at the cliff edge motionless. 8:30 p.m. A fog rolls in. Elaine is never seen again. August 4th, her sketchbook is found open on the bench, pages torn out. A drawing remains. A girl standing in mist, facing a tall, indistinct figure. 2001, Judith Dalton receives the first letter. No prints. No DNA. 2004, the Polaroid arrives. A girl resembling Elaine. Message reads, "She watches the sea now." 2009, Vanish Coast podcast breaks the case wide open. Now, the theories. Elaine, under extreme emotional stress and with a lifelong connection to mythic imagery, orchestrated her own disappearance. Some believe she started over elsewhere, possibly under an unnamed man sent the letters herself. But would she truly leave her mother like that? And how would she never age in that Polaroid? A far more sinister possibility. Someone was watching Elaine, studying her. Perhaps a stalker drawn in by her sketches or solitary habits. They abducted her and years later, used her typewriter to torment her mother with cryptic clues. The podcast audience split on this. Some felt it was too elaborate for a simple abduction. This is where the case spirals into legend. The Scarborough coast has long whispered of the Watcher and the fog, an old myth of a figure who lures lost souls into the mist. The tall shape seen by the lighthouse keeper. The girl facing the sea. The sketch left behind. Was Elaine chosen or claimed? Even now, listeners of the podcast report seeing that same fog swirl and naturally on Holbeck Hill. Some leave sketchbooks behind, hoping she returned. Others say she never left. The timeline offers facts. The theories, only shadows. Today, Elaine Dalton's story lives on, not in headlines, but in headphones. The Vanish Coast podcast has become a cult phenomenon. Thousands have trekked to the cliffs of Holbeck Hill. Some bring candles. Some bring copies of her artwork. All come with questions. In 2023, a new twist. A second Polaroid was mailed to the podcast host. No return address. Postmarked Scarborough. The image. A figure, far in the distance, standing in the morning light near the same bench where Elaine was last seen. But this time, it's facing the camera. The face is blurred, but the clothes match Elaine's. A single word on the back, "Remember." No one knows who sent it, and no one has claimed it's fake. Judith Dalton passed away in 2022. She never found her daughter, but her voice remains archived in every episode, her hope echoing in digital waves. Elaine's story isn't closed, because every few months, another listener reports something strange. A new sketch, a fog that rolls into quickly, a figure on the edge of the cliff, and then gone. The question remains, did Elaine vanish into legend, or is she still out there, sketching the unseen? Subscribe for more long-form true crime stories, mysteries, and haunting disappearances from the US, UK, and beyond. Like, share, and tell us, what do you think happened to Elaine Dalton?